just from an intangible standpoint, just understand that you can do it. That I remember studying for Security Plus in my cop car, not knowing what anything was about, right? And also, don't be afraid of failure. Yes, that imposter syndrome is going to hit you like a Ram truck. Just understand that that is perfectly fine. You are never going to know everything, from the beginner level to the senior level to the execs, the CISOs. Nobody is going to know everything. One, pick a focus area. Like, for example, if you want to work in cloud, focus on, being in the cloud. But prior to that, I would say, first and foremost, go and get your Security Plus. That's kind of like the standard baseline. You're going to get a really good understanding of the basics. I would also couple that with learning networking fundamentals, right? You don't necessarily have to go off and get the A+ or the Network Plus, but you have to understand what you're securing, right? After that, as far as getting into the cloud realm, I would say pick one cloud service provider and stick with it. So if you want to learn Azure, if you want to learn AWS, Google Cloud, pick one and just focus in on it. I would say gain an introductory cert in that.
Cyber heroes and cyber fans, welcome to another episode. As you know, I'm your host, Mr. Fingers, that cybersecurity guy. And today, I'm thrilled to welcome an incredible guest with a truly inspiring career journey, from serving as a police officer, protecting and serving communities, to now excelling as a cloud security engineer. He is quite a true testament to the power of resilience, adaptability, and re-innovation. He has a deep passion for securing cloud environments through innovative automation and also cutting-edge security strategies. With his expertise in AWS, Azure, and also a very impressive list of certifications. What's more fascinating about this particular individual is how his law enforcement background has actually shaped his approach to cybersecurity, bringing a very unique change to the cybersecurity game with a very unique perspective to the way he tackles challenges, manages incident, and also safeguards digital landscapes. Ladies and gentlemen, cyber heroes and cyber friends, please help me welcome Michael Spanks Jr. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be on, and thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be having you as a guest, because your journey has been quite inspiring, moving from a police officer to now a cloud security engineer. But what truly inspired you to be able to transition into cloud engineer? Why the sudden change from being a law enforcement person to moving to cloud security engineer?
Right. So it's so funny. My entire adult life has just been security. And initially it doesn't feel as though I chose that. It just sort of chose me. So even prior to getting into law enforcement, I was an armed security officer. And then prior to that, I worked with, juveniles in a detention center. So literally my entire adult life since graduating college in 2016, the first time, has just been security. But mainly coming from law enforcement, at the time, I would consistently get a lot of reports stating, hey, I think I'm a victim of fraud. I clicked on this email, I gave them my number. I went to go buy some credit cards and gave them all the information. So that's what kind of sparked my interest in the cybersecurity. And I'm like, this is where the way of crime is actually going. It's not just in the hard physical world, but online, right? So I had then signed up for a boot camp, did the 6-month program, got to work with tools like Nikto and Nessus and learned all the basic fundamentals. And from there, it just skyrocketed. My interest and love for cybersecurity just went up and up and up. And then within, I would say, 10 months of graduating that program is when I landed my first role as a SOC analyst. So yeah, man, that's what initially just sparked my love for cybersecurity, was just being out in the field and then seeing people be victims of phishing attacks left and right. It just seemed like a natural progression to me.
Nice, beautiful. And how did that experience, obviously from law enforcement, shape the way you approach cybersecurity today? And number two, I think I want to know personally, the mind shift? Was it hard for you to be able to shift your mind from that mindset to a much more security focused mindset?
So the crazy thing about it is a lot of the intangibles that I carried over from law enforcement actually shifted directly over into cybersecurity. Obviously, you have to learn the technical aspects. Like the first time I heard of ports, I was like, what is this? Like, oh my goodness, this is so much, right? But a lot of the intangibles actually carry over from law enforcement. So when we talk about alert triage, right? Whenever you show up to a scene, you kind of have to triage the scene. Okay, which one is more important? What do I have to take care of first? I have to get this lady's info. I need this information for the report. So a lot of those intangibles shift over to cybersecurity, whether that's chain of custody. When handling evidence, you have to make sure that everybody that handles that piece of evidence signs off on it, right? And the same thing kind of carries over into cybersecurity, writing reports. A lot of the report writing that I do, I immediately shifted over into cybersecurity. And one of my guys that works on the team, he was like, yeah, I can definitely tell you worked in law enforcement because of the way you write reports. The biggest challenge was the technical aspect, like I stated. It's just, I'm like, man, what is a port number? What is this TCP IP? What is, and at first it can be sort of overwhelming, but the more time that you give it and the more that you delve into resources, whether that's YouTube, if somebody explains it to you like you're a fifth grader, it just becomes easier and easier. So at first it was overwhelming, but over time it just becomes second nature.
And I love the fact that you mentioned in the challenges that you had to go through as well, because that was actually one of my initiative questions. Because that challenges for me, I feel like that was not a challenge. That for you was something that you were learning because it was a learning curve for you. And I always say that even when you make mistakes, mistakes are not mistakes. Mistakes are learning curves as well. What advice would you give to somebody who's interested to becoming a cloud security engineer?
I would say, just from an intangible standpoint, just understand that you can do it. All right. Before I even get into the, technical aspects and certifications, understand that you can do it. Like I said, I remember studying for Security Plus in my cop car, not knowing what anything was about. Right. And also, don't be afraid of failure. Yes, that imposter syndrome is going to hit you like a Ram truck. Just understand that that is perfectly fine. You are never going to know everything from the beginner level to the senior level to the execs, the CISOs. Nobody is going to know everything. It is okay that you don't know everything starting out, because when I made the transition over, I thought that I had to know any and everything. One, pick a focus area. Like, for example, if you want to work in cloud, focus on, being in the cloud, understanding what the cloud is, right? But prior to that, I would say, first and foremost, go and get your Security Plus. That's kind of like the standard baseline. You're going to get a really good understanding of the basics. I would also couple that with learning networking fundamentals, right? You don't necessarily have to go off and get the A plus or the network plus, but you have to understand what you're securing, right? So getting a deep, thorough understanding of networking fundamentals, there's tons of free resources that you can do, a lot of virtual labs that you can set up. So that way you get that fundamental understanding of what networking is, what TCP IP is, important port numbers, switches, routers. Learn that and then take your Security Plus, right? So that way you have a fundamental understanding of what it is that you're securing. Um, After that, as far as getting into the cloud realm, I would say pick one cloud service provider and stick with it, right? So if you want to learn Azure, if you want to learn AWS, Google Cloud, pick one and just focus in on it. I would say gain an introductory cert in that, right? So Azure Fundamentals, you have the Cloud Practitioner for AWS. So that way you're now understanding cloud environments, right? You're understanding the functionalities of certain features. So now you have a good security foundation. Now you have a good Azure foundation, right? Once you have that good foundation, now it's time for you to start building. Get in there, fall flat on your face. Don't know what you're doing at all. Build environments and set up a portfolios. For those who are starting out, I would recommend you doing guided projects. So that way you have somebody that's actually walking you through the different features, how to set this up, how to set that up. So that way you develop that comfort, right? Man, I can go on for a long. I don't know how long you want me to go, but it's so much.
We've got all the time. Continue, please. Don't worry.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once you have, your security plus, you have a good, you know, foundation of networking fundamentals. You know what subnets are. You understand what a VPC is, this, that, and the other. Do the guided projects, right? Then what I would say is it's very important for you to do a practical hands-on certification on Blue Team, right? Because you are going to be handling alerts, you are going to be responding to incidents. It's very important for you to understand, security operations from that standpoint, right? The ones that I personally recommend that are very good are Security Blue Team Level 1, where that's a 24-hour hands-on certification. You have the PSAA from TCM Academy, another great hands-on certification that just released. You also have the CCD from Cyber Defenders. Everything is completely hands-on, and you're really going to get those technical skills that you need to transfer over, right? Because I tell everybody, simply because you have a certification does not mean you're ready for the job. It may help with HR, but what I also tell people is if you're going to get an advanced cert with no certifications, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to give you the time of day, right? So I would say networking fundamentals, start out. Security plus, start out. Then what focus area do you want to be in? Do you want to be a pen tester? Do you want to do cloud security? Do you want to do GRC? So many areas, right? Next, guided projects. Once you do a good amount of guided projects, go and take a practical hands-on security operations certification. Because so that way you can develop that confidence and develop those hands-on skills. After that, man, I would say once you have those good to go, you need to revamp your resume because you can have all the skills in the world, but if your resume isn't up to snub, then it's going to be for nothing, right? Make sure that you have great formatting, great grammar, things of that nature, right? Also, you're going to have to start doing your own projects, demonstrate those hands-on skills, right? Once you've taken the networking fundamentals, the security plus, guided projects, the hands-on cert, now it's time for you to actually start building out your own lab. So that way you can demonstrate those real world skills, right? Use ChatGPT to help you come up with project ideas. Say, hey, ChatGPT, I need a project that demonstrates this, this, and that. And you can put that on your resume, right? So now you have a good amount of certs, you have a project, you can put those on your resume and speak to that experience, right? And then LinkedIn. As we both know, LinkedIn, share your projects. Make sure that you have a great professional photo, right? A good cover photo, right? Because so many times a lot of people may be struggling, but when I look at their profiles, it doesn't look professional. It doesn't look very clean cut. So when a recruiter is going through your profile, they don't really have much to work off, right? So I would say that's paramount. So now that you have your LinkedIn set up, you have a good resume, you need to begin to network. Don't be shy. Talk to people, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's, going to events out in town, whether that's CTFs. Talk and network with people because I think a recent study that I've seen is 65% of jobs, at least in the United States, come from referrals. You simply just know somebody, right? So getting out there, networking and put yourself out there, that's probably the cherry on top, I would say, when making that transition.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is a perfect roadmap to how to get into cybersecurity. In fact, how to build your portfolio, how to learn everything from the basics, from nothing to hero. So what do we call zero to hero? So thank you for that, Michael. Really appreciate that. And that's actually something which is quite useful. And I know a lot of people are going to take what you've said and they are going to make use of it as well. And thank you for sharing those insights as well. And I think a question which I have is, did you struggle finding a job after you transitioned? While you were transitioning and after you did all these things, did you struggle finding a job?
Yes, initially I did. So I gained my first role back in late 2022. I had graduated the boot camp and took my security plus in October 2021. So it had taken me approximately 10 months to a year to actually break in. And that was from adjusting my resume, right? I had actually gotten a couple of interviews. And this is another thing that I want to share with everybody. There are going to be times where you're qualified, you go through an interview process, you knock it out of the park, and then at the last minute they say that they're going to go with somebody else. It is the most gut wrenching, heart wrenching thing. I'm telling you, it happens, but don't let that shake your confidence. One of the ways that I was actually able to get my first opportunity was at my first company. A guy that was overseeing my cohort and I was teaching us, his company at the time had SOC analyst positions open. So he knew all the training that I went through, put in a good word for me and did the interviews, and the rest was history. So that speaks importance to the significance of networking and nurturing your networking, not just talking to people, but network effectively networking and nurturing those relationships, growing them. Don't just hit somebody up and then leave it. Grow that so that way they get to know you. So in the event that that opportunity presents itself, they can refer you. You can showcase your skills in the interview and get that opportunity.
So tell us, for somebody maybe who's quite interested in becoming a cloud security engineer, what is a cloud security engineer? I think that was a question which I was
Yeah,
supposed to start with,
I
but
know
what
you're
is
fine.
a cloud security engineer?
Yeah, so it's a lot of these terms are pretty broad and the titles are pretty broad, but essentially what a cloud security engineer does is you help implement security solutions for a cloud environment, right? Whether that's, implementing bastion hosts, automating certain security tasks like vulnerability updates to VM servers, whether that's actually responding to security alerts within the cloud environment. Basically, you protect all the data and all the VMs and all the resources within the cloud environment. You implement and secure those solutions, right? So that's essentially what you're doing. Think of it as a security guard for the cloud. Yeah, so I fundamentally just shifted over into the more cloud security aspect. So, starting out, typically you'll get assigned projects. So for me, right, I'm just going through all of our resources and identifying which ones are critical, tagging vulnerability updates, making sure that all of our VMs are up to date on a scheduled basis. So far, that's what it looks like for me. And then, of course, responding to any security alerts that might come up on our VMs, going through our security recommendations and making sure that, okay, hey, this is a recommendation that needs to be made. We need to implement X solution. This is how we go about doing it. I relay that to my team. And then if it's feasible for what we need, then we go about that. So that's typically, how my day shakes out.
And that's beautiful because that shows me how focus driven you are. And you've actually grown so much in your career in such a short space of time. Kudos to you on that. And you've always sharing insights on LinkedIn. Most people don't know that. You're always sharing insights, and most of the time you always share your experience on LinkedIn. And for me, when you share your story and your experience, showing others that, hey, watch out for this in terms of mistakes. Don't do that. Be careful of that. Look out for this and that, and that for me, I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, and also sharing what happened, how it happened on your side as well. Thank you for that, for sharing with the community as well. Yeah, what's one of the most exciting or challenging projects you've actually worked on ever since you started currently on your job?
Oh man, I would say the most challenging project was actually the first one that I did in AWS. It's actually on my Medium page where I automated the vulnerability scans for a certain period of time and then set the Lambda function to export those logs to S3 and then have S3 send me a notification saying, hey, a vulnerability scan has been done, this, that, and the other, right? So technically in AWS Inspector, you can do automated scans, right? But I wanted to take it a step further. I had built my first Lambda function and I was like, oh my goodness, like this every time I try to implement it, there's always an error. I have to go back and fix the code. I have to get permissions. Oh, and this is where you actually learn. Oh, this function actually needs permissions in order to communicate with that function. And that function also needs permissions and access to communicate with that. So that was the most painstakingly amazing and rewarding feeling, which is assigning IAM permissions, implementing the code and then seeing everything come to fruition, which is like music to my ears, man. So that by far was the most challenging but most rewarding experience I had, working with Lambda for the first time, working in depth with permissions. Man, that was so amazing.
If I were to ask you to do it again, would you do it again?
I can do it again because now I know what I'm doing. But yeah, I would definitely do it again. And not only would I do it again, I would ask, okay, how can I actually make this project better?
Yeah.
Because there's actually one project that Josh Madakor is known for, where he does like the Azure Sentinel honeypot. And I was like, okay, how can I expound on this? And that's when I implemented Terraform. I was like, okay, I'm not just going to manually go through and do the resources. Let me actually create that environment using Terraform, which is infrastructure as code. And so I got that, and then it just expedited the entire process, right? And that's another little tidbit that I want to give people is if you are going to do guided projects, ask yourself, how can I actually make this better? How can I showcase another skill set and actually add on to it, right? So, yeah, man, that was one of the projects I'll never forget.
How important is coding? Because I hear you talking a lot about coding. How important is somebody to know how to code in cybersecurity? Do you think the person can still break into cybersecurity even if they don't know how to code?
So this is one of those crazy hot topics that I've always been split on, honestly.
I know.
um,
I know. I've seen it.
it's just, I would say it really all depends, right? I would say if you're going to be working as like a GRC analyst, or you're going to be working as a SOC analyst one, right? Starting out, you're probably not going to be utilizing a lot of coding, right? You're just going to be responding and triaging alerts. You're not going to be really, delve into coding like that. But what I will say is learn how to write scripts, Python scripts, in order to automate certain tasks, right? You're not going to be a full on web developer. You're not going to be a full stack, developer. So you don't have to get into the weeds like that. But what I will say is, do your research and Google, how do I automate, a certain script, in order to automate this task, right? Because now I'm asking myself, okay, how can I automate this vulnerability scanner? How can I automate, this VM update, right? And there's tons of repositories out there that you can use, right? As long as you understand what the code is doing, you have access to code and repository to say, hey, this automates this task, right? So just learn how to build basic security automation scripts, and that'll take you a long way, man, because you're not going to need to be a front end stack developer. You don't need to know multi-threading and this, that, and the other. You don't have to do all that, but just basic understanding of Python skills would definitely take you far, especially the higher that you move up and the more experience that you gain. It's going to be more valuable.
Yeah, that's true. I actually do agree with you with that. It also depends on the career path that you're going. But as you were saying, just to add on what you're saying, if you do know code, it puts you, it actually gives you a huge advantage. Because, for example, you can get a senior who doesn't know how to read code, and you're a junior, but you know how to read code. If an alert comes in and they can't read that particular code, you can tell the senior in terms of reading the code, oh, this is what's happening right now. This person is trying to execute ABC, and that puts you ahead. So just knowing the basics also, I think it really helps as well. So thank you for that and sharing for that. What are the things that we don't talk about in cybersecurity? Because, there's certain things in cybersecurity we don't talk about, but working in cybersecurity, what are 3 things that you would like to give advice to people who are still coming in or about to come into cybersecurity, that certain things that we don't talk about working in cybersecurity?
So actually working in cybersecurity, the first thing that I will say is you will have imposter syndrome. It happens. And you know what? That's perfectly fine and it's perfectly normal, because you're like, oh my goodness, you're going to be questioning yourself left and right. Do I know this? Do I know that? Please understand that you are going to have imposter syndrome, and that is perfectly normal. I had it. And also, don't let your first mistake really take you down. Like the first time I made a mistake in cybersecurity, I thought it was the end of the world. I was thinking about it constantly. And if you have a really solid, great team, they're like, Mike, it's okay. We work through it. You're going to be fine. So, one, understanding imposter syndrome is going to be real. It's okay. It's normal. It's natural. After about a year or so, once you get more comfortable and you get into the flow of things, that'll slowly but surely start to dwindle away. 2, working in cybersecurity, do not be afraid to ask questions. That is probably going to be the biggest thing, right? When you're working in cybersecurity, whether that's a SOC analyst or whether you're an information security analyst, try your best to always understand what's going on, how to respond to an alert. If you hit a roadblock, please communicate with your team about what it is that you're actually seeing and how can they actually help and get a second opinion. because you'll try to take on something because you're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to prove that you know something. And then you just end up making an entire mistake and it just made the situation worse, right? So I would say number two, don't be afraid to ask questions. If there's an alert that you don't understand, if you don't know how to triage or research a certain alert, ask your team. They'll be more than willing to actually help you out because we've all been there. From the VPs to the senior, we're constantly asking questions. So one, understanding imposter syndrome is real and you can actually go through it. Two, don't be afraid to ask questions. You're going to need your team. There's just too much going on. And then three, continuous learning. Working within cybersecurity, you're always going to have to stay on your toes. If you're working and you have a little bit of downtime, watch a training video or, work through, planning out a lab or seeing what somebody else is doing and then incorporate what you've learned into your daily task, into your daily job, right? Continuous learning, whether that be going and get another practical cert, building out a lab. So when you're working within cybersecurity, work through imposter syndrome, ask questions when you don't understand something, and continuously learn. And don't just learn for the sake of learning, learn and master that role that you're actually in. So I would say those are three things if you're going to be working in cybersecurity that you definitely have to hone in on.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much. And then for that one, if you had a magic phone right now and you could give your younger self one piece of advice before transitioning into tech, what advice would you currently give to your younger self?
Go to WGU if you can. Don't worry about going to the biggest major 4-year universities. And get a job working help desk easily. I think that's a great entryway, especially if I was a teenager and getting ready to graduate high school. Start out in a community college because oftentimes, at least here in America, it's always about going to the biggest brand name college, right? And it says something about you, the prestige of it all, right? Stay at home, go to a community college, get a job working help desk, and really work those skills. So that way, by the time you hit 19, 20, you're really ready to take on your first cybersecurity role at such a young age, because then you'll have the experience, you'll have the cert. You're going to be so far ahead of your peers who are still in college trying to get their degree. You already have one through a community college. You saved a lot of money and you have the experience to start out so young. So if I could go back in time and I had the magic phone, that's what I would tell my younger self.
Actually, I want to find out what is your why? Because when every time people always question me in terms of fingers, I want to get into cybersecurity and I'm quite interested. The first thing I always tell them is, okay, number one, understand why do you want to get into cybersecurity and what is your why? Because your why will actually give you the how in terms of your roadmap. But what is your why? What is your motivation?
The why was kind of like going back to what I had stated earlier. When I had kept getting those calls about people getting frauded and just losing money. And, to us, it just seems like, oh my goodness, why would you fall for that? But we also have to understand, it was a lot of older people. They're not used to how tech works nowadays, right? So I was like, okay, the reason why I want to get into this is because this is the way the world is actually going. Phishing emails and phishing attacks and fraud is only going to continue to become a worse problem. And I see a lot of older people who are victims to that. And they were losing not just $10, $20, they were losing thousands of dollars. Some of them losing, a chunk of their savings because of these phishing attacks. So I was like, you know what? Not only do I love and enjoy tech and I love working with computers, but this is another motivation for me is I want to stop this kind of crime because I know that it's going to be even worse, right? When you're out there working on the force, sure, not every call is the same, but you kind of do develop a routine, right? Whether that's traffic stops, whether that's writing reports, you sort of develop a routine. But with this one, it's forever changing, forever evolving, forever growing. And more people are only going to be susceptible to that. So let me go in and try to stop crime in the virtual world, right? So that was my ultimate why.
And I think just to close off the show, what is your goal for the next 2 to 3 years, career goal? Yeah, where do you see yourself currently on those 3 years to come from now?
So I would say I would just over the next couple of years just continue to get that experience. Fortunately, I work with a great team, a great company that has been nothing but good to me. I'm just going to continue to get that experience here working as, in cloud security and just building that up. Cloud security architect is just like, that's like the ultimate like dream, actually, designing and doing things of that nature. But man, over these next couple of years, man, just getting that experience, I work with a phenomenal team and I'm excited and love the company that I work for and just continue to hone in my skills as a cloud security expert, man. So that's definitely the plan.
Thank you so much, Michael. And any last words with that you would like to leave, the viewers out there in terms of the cyber heroes and the cyber fans? What last words would you like to leave them with?
Last words, I would say, do not be afraid to fail. Set a date for when you take certification. The reason why most people push those dates back is because they're scared to fail. One of the driving forces and one of the biggest quotes that I always have is from the greatest athlete of all time, my favorite athlete of all time, Michael Jordan. I had failed over and over again in life, and that's why I succeed. If you don't pass a certification exam the first time, that's perfectly fine. I failed a couple of certifications, went back and I passed them, right? Don't be afraid to fall on your face, whether that's building out a lab and you're hitting roadblocks. Once you get over that hurdle, it's only going to boost your confidence. So don't be scared to fail, ask questions, network. Like I said, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can hit any of us up on LinkedIn, man. So those would be my final thoughts to everybody out there. And again, man, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on your platform, man. I think what you're doing is incredibly exceptional. You're helping others, along their journey. What you're doing is absolutely amazing, man. The work that you put into this platform and what you do on LinkedIn, you are currently, man, just inspiring everybody else, man. You inspire me.